Hardy fiber cement siding is proven to withstand water, pests, and fire better than wood-based siding. And it looks better while doing it. Hardy siding has been chosen for 10 million homes and counting. See the proof at jameshardy.com.
May I have your attention, please? We need to talk about inflation right now. It's urgent. And it's urgent because if we don't talk about it now, some of you might not be here later. And I mean that literally.
They say there's no good news.
There's no good news.
Inflation is especially hurting small businesses. That's according to a new survey from Forbes magazine. 65% of small business owners say they are not paying themselves a salary just to keep their business afloat. Nearly 30% of those entrepreneurs say that they are worried their business may not make it through another year.
Inflation, everyone's feeling it, and small and medium businesses say they're struggling so much, many have had no option but to increase prices. According to data from MYOB, just over 80% saw increased overhead costs last year.
Sentiment among U.S. small business owners in March slipped to its lowest level in more than 11 years amid rising concerns about inflation. That's according to a survey out Tuesday from the National Federation of Independent Business.
As if you hadn't noticed, the cost of living is going up. But of course you noticed. You're quite aware. The rent's up, food's up, everything is up. I know you wish you could forget about it, at least for just a moment. But it's people like me who keep bringing it up, right? Well, the reason that I'm bringing it up is because a lot of freelancers, you're keenly focused on what inflation means for your household, but you're not nearly as focused on what it means for your business. We have to change that because prices are going to keep going up for the foreseeable future. Every day, depending on what circles you're in, what you listen to, what you watch, you'll hear chatter about the rate of inflation. Forget the rate right now. The rate is a cornball indicator of how fast prices are allegedly rising. What we need to focus on is the direction, which is up. Prices have been going up. They're going to keep going up. And a whole lot of you have not really thought about what rising prices mean for your business. So you certainly don't have a plan of what rising prices mean for your business. And that's going to cause a lot of financial strain for a lot of freelancers. Even worse, here soon, it's going to write the final chapter for a lot of freelancers. Not to mention, there's some we've already lost.
Please check the number.
Look
and dial
around.
Again. Thank you.
Some of the people who were out here doing that self-employment thing 1, 2, 3 years ago, they're not among us anymore. Many of them are on payroll somewhere now. I'm not saying that to put down getting a job if you want or need a job. My point is that the environment for entrepreneurs has changed, and it's changing without a lot of people realizing it. It just catches up to them eventually. And inflation is one of the reasons why. So let's dig into some things that need to be dug into for those of you who are still here that are still trying to stay here. Very, very high on that list of things that freelancers need to think about when they think about inflation, if not the top thing for a lot of us, is financing. We keep hearing about access to capital, borrowing costs going up, the days of cheap money being over. And a lot of times freelancers tend to connect financing costs to household expenses like their mortgages or their car payments, or else it registers in their mind as background noise that's really only relevant to big corporations. No. It's very relevant to your solo, to your 2, 3, 4 person operation. When you hear those conversations about the Federal Reserve trying to rein in spending by hiking interest rates, that's not just for the people over there. A lot of freelancers, a lot of creatives put or have put business expenses on credit cards. And a lot of you have lines of credit. Hopefully, you have stopped doing that. You have paid off your debt. or you're in the process of paying back what you owe. The cost of servicing debt, better known as paying back what you borrowed, that's one of the business expenses that's going up.
The cost of borrowing has escalated in recent months, and businesses, big and small, have no choice but to cope with higher loan repayments. It doesn't appear that interest rates are coming down anytime soon.
According to Goldman Sachs, interest payments for small businesses will rise on average to about 7% of their revenue next year. That's up from nearly 6% in 2021.
We're just white knuckling it. What's gonna get?
That next year that you just heard about is this year. Minimum payments are blowing up because interest rates are going and have gone up. A lot of people who ran up debt for business didn't think about the fact that interest rates could or would go up on money that they've already borrowed. But that's exactly what's happening. You get a notice one day and it says your interest rate has gone from 4% to 14%. Now that sounds drastic, maybe unrealistic to some of y'all, but I promise you it's not. And in many cases, it's a lot worse. So let's say you have two debt streams for your business. You have a credit card and you have a line of credit. Your payments may have gone up by, or may go up $10, $15, or several $100s a month on each one of those debt streams. Are you really ready for those increases? Those increases that are just for your business? We're not even talking about the fact that you'll face the same type of increases on your household debt. A lot of people are not ready for those increases. A post from the IMF, or the International Monetary Fund, says increasing shares of small and medium-sized businesses in both advanced and emerging economies barely have enough cash to pay their interest expenses. And defaults are rising. That post was from October of 2023. And not only did it say that small and medium businesses, many of them barely have enough money to cover the interest on their debt payments, but it said these troubles are likely going to worsen in the coming year, which would be this year. Welcome to 2024. On top of that, if you've been operating off of debt, if you rely on debt to run your business, or you don't have any cash on hand and you'll need debt in the future, guess what? It's going to be harder to get, and what you do get is going to be a lot more expensive. Credit providers, they're tightening their lending, meaning they're handing out less money and they're getting more judgmental about who they're handing it out to. A Reuters article from March that was talking about how U.S. businesses are struggling for credit. It starts off talking about how small businesses are struggling to get financing from traditional lenders. And it says about 77% of small business owners are concerned about their ability to access capital, and 28% of loan applicants said they had taken out a loan or line of credit with payment terms they felt were predatory. And that was based on a survey from Goldman Sachs that was released in January. In that article, one of the business owners interviewed was Chantel Chambliss, based in Richmond, Virginia. She outlined how she's been hunting for a $25,000 loan since May. Mind you, this is a March article, so that means she's been looking for $25,000, which is not an extreme or absurd amount of money for a business, for almost a year. She said she had been turned down by several lenders, forcing her to scale back her ambitions. What I had planned to achieve 6 months ago, I haven't even started with that due to funding constraints, she told Reuters. She did say she was able to borrow about $6,000 from a non-bank lender that provided funding based on prospective revenues, but she said she doesn't want any more money from them because the terms were unsuitable. She said, the process of looking for a loan has been so frustrating that I have just given up on it. And that is the experience of a lot of people. Traditional lending is not available, leading people to turn to other sources of lending. So let's say you need a piece of equipment, a laptop, a tablet, camera, whatever. You may need multiple pieces of equipment. You may need supplies. You may need inventory. If you don't have the cash to buy it and you have to borrow and you think you're going to spread it out in monthly payments via one of these other options, well, hopefully you know that purchase is going to make you money because you are about to get pinky ring pimped for real. While I was working on this episode of the podcast, I investigated this. I went to sites like Amazon, Best Buy, HP.com, B&H, and I explored the financing options. And let me tell you, they are like motel by the hour sleazy. Say you want to open a Best Buy credit card or you want to get the PayPal line of credit. The interest rates for those options are in the ballpark of like 28 or 29%. And those buy now, pay later options, the payment terms are crazy. So in one example, I put a computer into a Best Buy cart and it came up to about $1,500 with tax and shipping. There was one of those buy now, pay later companies, Zip or ZipPay. These people required that I pay about $530 of the purchase price that day. Then they offered 1 year of payments that were several $100s per month. At the end of the payment period, that $1,500 computer would have been over $1,800. They were going to charge me $300 for them to front me less than $1,500 for 12 months. That's pimp. Then there was another buy now, pay later company. I think it was Afterpay. They have a system where they can issue these temporary credit card numbers so you can make purchases at retailers that they're not officially linked to. The interest rates, once again, were astronomical. They only financed the thing or were only offering to finance this $1,500 purchase for I think it was 3 or 6 months, and your payments are due every 2 weeks. So you're paying hundreds of dollars every 2 weeks and paying an astronomical amount of interest. Now, granted, some of those credit options, like the PayPal credit, they do offer no interest if you pay the whole purchase during the grace period, which in the case of PayPal credit was 6 months, I believe. But y'all know how that goes. If you don't, let me tell you. The reason that they make those offers of 0% interest if the debt is fully repaid within the grace period is because most people don't do it. They don't pay off the debt that fast. And these companies rake in fat pimp daddy interest money. Just the other day, I heard a YouTuber, he was going in on some other YouTubers, talking about how they should invest in their setup and upgrade their background for their show. No, you shouldn't. Not if you have to do it with borrowed money. It's not worth it, and this is not the time to be frivolous with credit. When you hear the Federal Reserve talking about reining in spending with interest rates, when you hear them talk about a restrictive stance and putting downward pressure on economic activity, this is it, y'all. Because interest rates make payments high. So the idea is to make payments so high that we can't go out and buy all of the latest, greatest new things. That is what they mean by downward pressure on economic activity. And because payments or servicing debt has gotten so expensive, a lot of people get squeezed out of the self-employed category. They're forced to go get jobs to pay their bills. And then you have people like this standing around clapping, toasting, talking about the unemployment rate is coming down. But debt isn't the only source of inflation that freelancers have to think about. What about rent? When people talk about rent going up, once again, the conversation tends to focus on residential costs. But for a lot of people, the rent for their office or studio space, that's gone up. Especially if you've been in your contract for several years and maybe your landlord didn't hike during the pandemic. If they haven't hiked yet, expect that it'll be coming. Are you really prepared to pay higher rent at home and at your office or studio? Or maybe you don't technically have a lease, but you work from, let's say, coffee shops or similar places like that. Believe me, I know that hustle. I have been there. Working where the Wi-Fi is good. For all my rural freelancers, for those that don't know, trust me, I know. And I also know that that is a real cost, especially now. The cost is getting realer with inflation. If you spend 4, 5, 6, 8 hours a day in a coffee shop, with coffees costing $6 or $7 plus snacks plus lunch, because most of us are going to get hungry at some point, you can easily burn through $30 or $40 a day working in a coffee shop. That sounds like a lot. Not to say that it happens every day, but it can easily happen, at least on some days. And of course, people will say, oh, find free Wi-Fi, go to the public library. For those of you who are about that life, I know that hustle too. I've been there with you. But inflation still has a way of finding you. Those days that you get hungry and you didn't bring your lunch, the hike in parking if you're in the city, the fact that you still stop by, you grab coffee, you grab a bottle of water. Being outside, whether you're going to an office or not, often involves spending money, at least on some days. And whatever you're spending money on is probably going up. So we really have to focus on those stealth costs and how much they're costing us. And speaking of stealth costs, depending on what you do, transportation is another real, y'all. If you're a journalist, a photographer, a blogger, or videographer, anything that causes you to move around a lot, it's like you know gas prices are up, but you may not have really stopped to consider how much professional transportation expenses are costing you versus personal transportation expenses. So since you probably drive the same vehicle, in your mind, it may just be all lumped together. Your brain may just be like, damn, I'm always at the gas pump. I'm spending more and more money on gas. But you're not registering that a lot of your gas expense is a business expense. And those who are using public transportation, in a lot of places, y'all are catching it too. A lot of times, the money or the means to get to the money is outside. And so y'all are paying 2, 3, 4 times more to move around your city. But since a lot of people take those type of costs as they come, a lot of people are not focused on how much inflation is impacting their business. And some of the costs for Uber and Lyft, they're so bonkers sometimes that you're paying rates that it's just embarrassing to admit that you pay. It's like, don't even tell anybody. And then we're still not done. There's a lot of other nickel and diamond that you're not going to be able to escape. But the problem is, it's not nickels and dimes anymore. For me, for example, some of the expenses, just a few, off the top of my head, that have increased within the last 2 months. Web hosting, that's gone up. And I have more than one site. Cloud storage has gone up. Several subscription costs to newspapers and other resources that I actually need and use for business, those have gone up. As a journalist, one of the expenses people don't talk about much is printing and requesting copies of records through FOIA requests. Those costs are going up. Those costs are normally charged by the page. So when you raise 10 cents a page to 25 cents or 50 cents a page to 75 cents, that quickly adds up. I made a FOIA request to Virginia State Police about a month or 2 or so ago. And in Virginia, you have the right to get an estimate so that you don't end up with a big bill that you're like, okay, I'm not paying this, or I don't want to pay this, or I can't afford it. So anyway, this is the response I got from Virginia State Police. In reviewing your request, you wanted us to provide a cost estimate in advance before any work was done. It is estimated that it will cost approximately $50 to process your request. Please note that this is only an estimate. The final cost may be more or less than what was previously quoted. Yeah, a minimum of $50. And that's one expense to get one story done. Now, what about other expenses? Do you have rental insurance? Do you have liability insurance? Do you have a virtual assistant? Do you have employees? Are you getting freelance services from Fiverr and those types of services? Because not much on Fiverr is really $5 anymore. I can tell you that. The real of inflation is here, folks. Some of us are paying tens of dollars more for business expenses. And you guys, if it's just tens of dollars more, you're really fortunate. Some of us are paying hundreds of dollars more. Some of us, we're talking stacks. And that's just for the increases. Are you built for that? Because a lot of us are so busy scrambling, trying to make the numbers work at home. And we're still trying to squeeze out some semblance of a decent, comfortable, somewhat enjoyable lifestyle that we're not even focused on the business inflation. But inflation and the efforts to address inflation, they are going to make the weak hands fold. And even those that don't seem like weak hands right now, many of you are going to get squeezed out of business if you don't come up with a plan. There are going to be casualties. Casualties are expected. If you don't believe me, check this.
Chair Powell, if you hit your projections, do you know how many people who are currently working, going about their lives, will lose their jobs?
I don't have that number in front of me. I will say it's not
just
an
a math
intended
problem.
consequence.
But it is, and it's in your report, and that would be about 2 million people who would lose their jobs. People who are working right now, making their mortgages. So Chair Powell, if you could speak directly to the 2 million hardworking people who have decent jobs today, who you're planning to get fired over the next year, what would you say to them? How would you explain your view that they need to lose their jobs?
I would explain to people more broadly that inflation is extremely high and it's hurting the working people of this country badly. All of them, not just 2 million of them, but all of them are suffering under high inflation, and we are taking the only measures we have to bring inflation down.
And putting 2 million people out of work is just part of the cost, and they just have to bear it?
Well, will working people be better off if we just walk away from our jobs and inflation remains 5-6%?
Calculated casualties. Let him tell you one more time.
Reducing inflation is likely to require a period of below potential growth and some softening of labor market conditions. Restoring price stability is essential to set the stage for achieving maximum employment and stable prices over the longer run. To conclude, we understand that our actions affect communities, families, and businesses across the country. Everything we do is in service to our public mission. We at the Fed will do everything we can to achieve our maximum employment and price stability goals.
Calculated casualties. There will be casualties. So in closing, I will say, freelancers, it is urgent that you think about inflation. And not only that you think about inflation, but that you sit down, crunch the numbers, and develop a plan to deal with inflation. Well, folks, if you like that podcast, if you found it helpful, or if you think it can help someone else, please like, subscribe, and share. If you would like to show some additional love, you will find the Cash App and PayPal details wherever you clicked into this podcast. As always, any and everything is greatly appreciated. Until next time, peace.